行騙長官下台，
行騙長官下台。
不要騙子。
Well, I believe that Hong Kong should have universal suffrage as soon as possible. I don't think Mr. C.Y. Leung has given an indication of that.
You cannot trust somebody who keeps changing the story every time. He keeps apologizing and changing the story every week, every time he opens his mouth. This we cannot accept. He must go.
He is chosen by dictators in Beijing, so he is not chosen by the Hong Kong people, so we have to protest against it.
2013 began with a huge demonstration. Some 130,000 people took to the street on the first date of 2013, expressing their disapprovals to the chief executive C.Y. Leung, who had been on the job for 6 months. It was the third huge demonstration since he came to power last summer. The demonstration was relatively peaceful at first, but as the sky turned dark, things became very nasty. Around 1,000 demonstrators organized another demonstration shortly after the original one was concluded. They played wildcat tactics as they laid siege at major road junctions in Central for hours. 9 people were arrested by the police over illegal assembly, but only this man was charged by the police. He will be reappeared at its magistrate court next year. What if 10,000 people lay siege in Central for a week? Sounds hypothetical, but indeed it's a question which has been dominating Hong Kong's political arena this year. When I hosted the Hong Kong Review last year, I referred to the chief executive election to the law of the jungle, not only because C.Y. Leung was dubbed as a wolf in the election, but also referring to the tricks he played in the contest. Eventually, he was named as a liar and triggered widespread of antipathy against him last year. This year, he managed to stop people calling him a liar, but it doesn't mean he has managed to rebuild a mutual trust with the public. Indeed, a number of incidents this year revealed that C.Y. Leung isn't just struggling to become a strong leader, but he is also accused of undermining Hong Kong's interests. As old, as true as the sky, and the wolf that shall keep it may prosper, but the wolf that shall break it must die. 1 year on, the strength of the wolf remains, but those who want to topple the wolf are also taking their toes as well. So how are they going to achieve their goal? Let's look back. It was this article that shocked the social activists. Dr. Benny Tai, a law professor from the University of Hong Kong, wrote an article on January the 16th saying he doesn't believe Peking would implement universal suffrage in Hong Kong wholeheartedly. He said the traditional tactics are no longer making impact on Hong Kong's democracy movement. Hence, he pledged to call up 10,000 people to lay siege in Central and then give themselves up to the police afterwards in order to overwhelm the judicial system. But he insists that the move must be peaceful but may be unlawful. Within weeks, a number of high-profile figures expressed their willingness to join.
真普選聯盟呢正式成立。
Indeed, his pledge has left some technical issues unanswered, so these veterans decided to act on their own.
We realize the difficulties ahead, and we understand that the only way to secure success is to win over the support of the people.
In the last battle 3 years ago, they already meant unity, but ended up in disarray. Are they for real this time?
Unity in diversity is what we expect of the alliance.
Alright, unity over everything. Shortly after the inauguration, they started their campaign within weeks in an attempt to gain public support and perhaps distance themselves from Benny Tai. Yet, whenever they kicked off, they had a roller coaster ride. Ever since the idea of Occupy Central came into light, Peking has been working hard to smear the movement. Whenever the Alliance held a seminar, they were heckled by these people. Even the Alliance had nothing to do with Occupy Central. They claimed they were independent, but media reports revealed that they were backed up by Peking. Yet, the Alliance still managed to table their proposals in July and triggered a fierce debate over civil nomination and nomination committee. As the Occupy Central movement had been labelled as unlawful and detrimental to Hong Kong, 2 court cases were under the spotlight. In May, legislator Albert Chan and Raymond Wong were found guilty of illegal assembly during the July 1st procession 2 years ago. They were fined $4,800 and sentenced to 5 weeks and 6 weeks of imprisonment, suspended for 12 months and 14 months respectively. Meanwhile, 4 LSD members were also accused of illegal assembly during a demonstration on April 1st last year. Their case is still going on. Both cases might have little impact on the Occupy Central movement, but certainly distressing for those who want to join. 6 months after the article was published, Benny Tai and his allies were still undeterred by this smear campaign. Instead, they decided to do something real. Some 600 people gathered at the new faculty of the University of Hong Kong on June the 9th as they took part into the first brainstorming session of the movement. It was aimed to seek support from their allies, but not everyone was convinced.
因為其實我哋嘅議題就唔希望有佔中，我哋希望咧梁振英或者係中央咧盡快俾個方案我哋。
I think we share the common ground and democracy. That is the common ground. Everyone come here because we want democracy. But in what form, how to achieve that, it could be different.
Undeterred by these people, the group had embarked onto a journey of no return. Since then, a number of community seminars have been held in an attempt to lay seeds across the territory. Yet the society had been torn apart as scuffles often erupted during public occasions. The scuffles might also be caused by CY Leung's incompetence, but given their aggressive attitudes, didn't they think it's destructive?
我就唔係建制派，我唔係喺個制度裏邊，我都唔係立法會議員，我係建設派，建設香港，希望香港人安定繁榮。
The scuffle over universal suffrage had unintentionally touched the nerve of the United Kingdom. On September 13th, an official from the Foreign Office wrote an article saying Britain would be willing to offer support in any way to achieve genuine universal suffrage in Hong Kong. Pan-Democrats welcomed the message, but China was fed up by the passage and regarded it subversive. Since then, Britain became cautious when commenting on Hong Kong's politics. CY Leung might realize that he had nowhere to hide on universal suffrage. Hence, he held a number of banquets with people from various spectrums of the society between late August and September in a bid to find out what to do with this topic. On October 17th, he told the legislators that the government would unveil the public consultation by the end of the year. CY Leung might also realize that he might not be fit to do the job. Hence, he asked Carrie Lam to handle it. About a fortnight before the program was formally launched, there was a messenger from Peking.
我这次来啊，是应特区政府邀请。实际上呢，我早就期待到香港来访问。
He paid a 3-day visit to Hong Kong and met a number of high-profile figures, including government officials and some legislators. His mission, he claimed he was on an opinion exchange tour, but indeed he laid down the rules on universal suffrage. The government offered luxurious hospitality to the messenger, as an official banquet was held at CY Leung's official residence. Around 100 people were invited, but only 2 Pan-Democrats were able to join. So what did they get from him?
佢頭先發言嘅時候，有講到提名權咧係唔應該受到不合理嘅限制。
He did not say outright that the civic nomination is contrary to the basic law.
愛國愛港呢個要求咧，李飛主任都講過，就話呢個唔係話新嘅問題。1984年嘅時候，鄧小平先生已經講過，管治香港係要愛國愛港嘅人。
A week later, it's time to put an official who constantly has a higher popularity than her boss onto a real test, a test that she mustn't fail.
主席，特區政府今日發表2017年行政長官及2016年立法會產生辦法諮詢文件，正式開展為期5個月嘅公眾諮詢。
Carrie Lam claimed that she's willing to listen, but stressed that the government would reject the idea if it significantly deprives from the basic law. The document didn't mention on self-nomination and patriotic to China and loyal to Hong Kong either, but asked the public to think about what to do if Peking refused to appoint the elected chief executive. So the government stands firm on its principles, and Benny Tai and his allies stand firm on fighting a genuine universal suffrage, and both sides have embarked onto their journey of no return. It may well be a bumpy ride for both, but certainly a journey that they would remember for life.
好高興我有兩個好嘅拍檔。二話不說，一齊上呢條船，呢條劍中嘅船。頭先牧師講話。
我宣布第四屆全港運動會現在開幕。
That was one of the government-funded PR programs this year. The Hong Kong Games was a biennial territory-wide multi-sport event aiming to promote sport and to enhance social cohesion. This year, the event was injected with an 8-month-long territory-wide program. It was aimed to build a sense of belonging across the territory. The program cost nearly $8 million and will be concluded in a few days' time. CY Leung might be on the right track by building a sense of belonging, but it wouldn't come without harmony. When he came to power last summer, he already realized that there was no honeymoon for him, partly because of the scandals in the days and months leading up to his coronation, but indeed it was the social problems which caused social discontent. Despite the complexity of these social problems, he vows to tackle them in an attempt to achieve harmony. Now 18 months on the throne and almost 12 months since he delivered his maiden policy address in January, what exactly has he done? Tensions between Hong Kong and China remain this year despite both public and private hospitals no longer accept pregnant women from China to give birth in reward for permanent Hong Kong residency. Early in the year, Hong Kong parents complained that they were struggling to buy baby formula as cross-border couriers continued to ferry large quantity of necessities to China every day. To tackle the problem, the government imposed a restriction on March the 1st. Under the rule, travelers could carry more than 2 cans of baby formula to leave the territory would be liable to prosecution. A number of prosecutions were made, but it also caused further tension with China. By the end of the year, the shortage remains. Despite there have been calls to lift the restriction, the government insists that it has no plans to do so. While the parents are still struggling to buy baby formula, some of them have already engaged into another battle. In October, parents from the Northern New Territories took to the street saying they had difficulty in securing kindergarten places for their children, as those born by parents from China also joined in to study local kindergartens.
舊年就係凌晨先去排隊，唔係前幾日已經要準備要排隊咯。
排隊嗰啲係啲咩人多？本地人多定係？
全部都係講國語人啊，外地人、內地人啊。
The Education Bureau insists that there was no shortage of kindergarten places. As the theory escalated, the Education Bureau and the kindergartens worked together by limiting the applicants to apply only one kindergarten and put Hong Kong applicants on top priority. The government may be incompetent on immigration, but still deserves a fortune. On March 25th, the Court of Final Appeal delivered an ultimate verdict that foreign domestic workers are not entitled to claim permanent Hong Kong residency, bringing the 2-year legal battle to an end. The court ruled that the job nature of foreign domestic workers is different from other foreign workers, as they are not allowed to take jobs other than household work during their stay, even if they've stayed in Hong Kong for more than 7 years.
Why Hong Kong people, Hong Kong government also treat us different with others?
On the rule of law, we're quite disappointed. While we respect the judgment, we disagree with it and think that we not only had the better but more principled arguments on the law.
Nevertheless, the verdict had defused a political time bomb as the court declined the government's request to seek basic law reinterpretation from Peking. During the chief executive election last year, CY Leung pledged to tackle the chronicle problems. So what has he done? On September 28th, the government unveiled Hong Kong's first poverty line. The line was set at median household income before tax. Anyone or a household earned below the line will be regarded as living in poverty. Under this, there are some 1.31 million people living below the line. But critics said the move was meaningless as the government didn't offer a solution on this subject. Apart from that, a steering committee was set up in May, aiming to find out the feasibility over whether to launch standard working hours legislation.
標準工時咧，其實係我哋都喺度講，就係可唔可以喺中期咧俾一個初步嘅方案啊？大家咧真係有個時間表嚟到傾，如果唔係咧就係有個蹉跎歲月嘅情況出現嘅。
It may take some time to draw a conclusion on this sensitive issue, but for those who have been suffering from poor working conditions, couldn't wait any longer. On March 28th, a strike erupted at the container terminal in Kwai Chung. Around 100 dockers from 5 subcontractors of Hong Kong international terminals went on strike, demanding a 20% pay rise and better working conditions. The dockers said they were not trying to hold their bosses and the territory to a ransom, but stressed that their wages had been declining since 1997. Apart from that, they also condemned the poor working condition as they had to work non-stop for 24 hours. The subcontractors and the main contractor, Hong Kong International Terminals, were reluctant to settle the dispute. Instead, the main contractor decided to engage into a PR battle and stressed that the working condition wasn't as bad as the dockers claimed. Union leaders disagreed.
入邊嗰個工作環境係好惡劣嚇，有相為證。
At one point, the union leaders were engaged into a legal battle with Chai Kwong Holdings over the use of plaza at Chai Kwong Tower. A number of talks were held, but all the attempts were fruitless. On May the 6th, the battle finally drew to a conclusion as the dockers accepted a 9.8% pay rise offered by the contractors. But not all the dockers could return to work as one of the contractors decided to close its business. On housing, CY Leung continued to tackle the chronicle problem. 2 pieces of land were awarded to a developer from China in June as he implemented Hong Kong Land for Hong Kong People policy. Indeed, the move brought little impact on the property market. The shortage of flats had provided an opportunity for Chai Kwong Holdings to put their hotel rooms on sale in February. The move attracted a number of transactions, but the government said the sale was unlawful. Eventually, the developer cancelled all the transactions by offering refund to the buyers. Meanwhile, another round of anti-speculation measures came into effect on February 23rd, but the move had infuriated the property agents across the territory.
政府出招，個樓市冇跌過，仲要升緊。另外，想買樓啲人買唔到。
一個正常嘅市場咧，如果停頓咗70%咧，正常嘅資源嘅流通就會受到影響。尤其喺而家美國就嚟退市，好多小業主都仲需要重新部署佢哋嘅投資嘅時候，如果樓市受到咁大嘅程度上嘅阻礙，佢哋想處理自己嘅資產、應付市場嘅轉變嘅能力都受到破壞。
On December 19th, the US Federal Reserve announced that it would scale down the quantitative easing from January next year. It's not yet clear how it would affect Hong Kong, but the government insists that those measures were necessary.
嗱，如果我哋乜都唔做，當我哋呢兩輪辣招都唔推出咧，你可以想象樓價會去到點樣嗰種瘋狂嘅情況啊！而我哋政府推出呢兩輪嘅我哋叫管理需求措施咧，除咗係針對個樓市之外咧，亦都針對嗰種資產泡沫嘅風險啊。
Indeed, the government has been working hard to find the way forward. In September, the government unveiled a 3-month public consultation on long-term housing strategies. Part of the measures is to regulate the subdivided flats, to speed up urban redevelopment, and of course to speed up the development at former Kai-tak Airport. It may take some time to develop Kai-tak, but the first batch of population had already arrived in August this year. But the most effective way to boost land supply is to develop new towns in the new territories. Having suffered the painful PR battle last year, the government revised the controversial Northeast Development Program. Yet it doesn't mean the government has admitted defeat. Instead, the government shifted development to Yunnan South, Hongshui-Kiu and Pingshuan in the northwest, as well as expanding the airport town of Tongchong on Lantau Island. According to the government's blueprint, the development programs would provide 1,160 hectares of land, housing some 310,000 people. A number of public consultation forums have been conducted, but those who would be vulnerable said they want to remain as it is.
但係有錢賠俾你喎。
我唔係要錢啦，我冇頭頭到尾我冇講到要錢啦。等於你介紹個女朋友俾我，我要啱得㗎。你唔啱，我唔啱，你俾我都冇用㗎。
你每日啊嚟150人，嚟香港嚟150人，1年5萬幾人。你而家呢個發展計劃只不過係容納17萬人，你而家不如將呢個計劃停止咗佢，唔好再搞啦。
The government recognized the problem, so it published this consultation document. It didn't pledge to curb immigration and also made no response to a recent verdict over new immigrants claiming CSSA. Instead, it pledged to import foreign labor, saying there would be a shortage of labor in the long run. Coming up, we will be looking at other issues that touch our nerves this year. More on that when we come back. Hong Kong is always proclaimed to be a free and open society, but a number of incidents reveal that such core values are under threat this year. In January, media report revealed that the government was about to bring the Companies Ordinance Amendment Bill to the Legislative Council, in which the personal particulars of company director would no longer be available to the public. The government insisted the move was aimed to better protect personal data, but critics disagreed.
喺外國營商嘅時候咧，佢哋亦都好多時咧，我哋亦都會查測佢哋，佢哋亦都會查測翻我哋嘅。咁如果冇咗呢個渠道嘅話，有可能咧係抹殺咗一啲有機會嘅商機嘅。
Our city remains an important regional base for the international media industry because of its reputation for transparency, fairness, and respect for the free press. But that hard-won reputation is now at risk because the proposed amendment will have the direct effect of making it a lot harder for the press to unearth stories such as the New York Times and Bloomberg's recent articles about Wen Jiabao and Xi Jinping's family members and their investments.
With mounting pressure, the government offered concession by dropping the controversial part of the bill, while the rest of the bill was put forward as planned. Within weeks, the freedom of expression was under the spotlight. In March, the standoff between the anti-Falun Gong group and the Falun Gong petitioners reached its peak after months of banner war. The war began in late May 2012 as the anti-Falun Gong group placed wall-to-wall banners at public hospitals where the Falun Gong petitioners practiced Falun Gong. The war was aimed to smear Falun Gong as an evil cult and to stop the petitioners from revealing the dark side of China's Communist Party. The war eventually triggered public outcry as many complained that the banners had caused nuisance and harassment, but the government ignored it for months. Until May this year, the police and the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department asked both sides to remove all the banners. But the ceasefire didn't last long. Instead, it just scaled down as both sides are struggling to flex their muscles. So technically, the anti-Falun Gong group succeeded. even the freedom on cyberspace wasn't safe either. On July 11th, the government unveiled a 3-month public consultation over how the copyright regime should deal with parody. The Copyright Amendment Bill was an infamous bill when it first tabled by the government in 2011, as it was dubbed as Article 23 for cyberspace by netizens. It didn't get through the electrical last time, so the government revised the bill and offered 3 proposals for discussion. 2 years on, the scuffles remained.
版權人唔係想去告人，我哋只不過係想喺一個制度底下，我哋大家點樣可以揾到食咁解啫。
試問呢啲又點算係扼殺創意呢？唔通真係要將成個版權制度改寫，剝奪版權人嘅授權制度，任意改編出版而賺取利益先至係啱咩？咁樣又點可以鼓勵原創呢？
雖然創意係可以 make money， 可以賺到好多錢，咁但係亦都有好大部分嘅創意其實真係攞嚟玩下就算嘅啦。
Security on cyberspace was also under threat this year. In late May, the former CIA employee Edward Snowden revealed that the US government had been undertaking a worldwide espionage program called PRISM since 2007. He fled to Hong Kong on May 27th and purportedly stayed here, where he spoke exclusively to this newspaper that how Hong Kong had been targeted. The government was reluctant to comment.
我想局長可唔可以向全香港嘅市民指出，今次斯諾登所講嘅嘢咧係廢話嚟嘅。
斯諾登先生到而家為止咧都冇提出咗咩啲具體嘅呢一啲嘅事項嘅資料出嚟，我可以喺咁嘅情況之下咧，我好難咧能夠作出一個評估或者回應。
The saga soon turned into a diplomatic row as Hong Kong rejected United States' request to extradite Edward Snowden. The saga dragged on for weeks. On June 23rd, he flew to Moscow on the day that the US government revoked his passport. He's still in Moscow and applying asylum in some 20 countries. Hong Kong's media industry was in a complete mess this year. On August 23rd, Asia Television, the ATV, was penalized by the Communications Authority. The penalty came following a 2-year investigation into ATV's maladministration and concluded that major investor Wang Cheng, who is not qualified to control the company, had exercised de facto control. ATV was fined $1 million and ordered this man to quit his job, saying he wasn't a fit and proper person to manage the company. ATV was furious and made its desperate attempt to save him.
多謝大家一直以嚟嘅支持，令到我覺得我呢3年半以嚟喺 ATV 嘅時間係冇白費到嘅。多謝你哋一直以嚟嘅支持。
He eventually left ATV 3 days after this rally. 3 weeks later, the Television Broadcast Limited was fined $900,000 by the Communications Authority over anti-competition practice. The broadcasting giant rejected the penalty and has filed a judicial review to the High Court. The free TV license application saga turned into another twist on October 16th as the government granted 2 new licenses to these 2 companies. But the government rejected Hong Kong Television Network's application, saying the market couldn't cope with 5 free TV operators at the same time. The lost battle of Hong Kong Television Network not only triggered huge public outcry, but also forced the company to cut 320 jobs 1 day after the government handed down the death penalty to the broadcasting infant. The row escalated into a political issue, but the government insists that the decision was correct.
行會喺考慮公眾利益嘅時候咧，認為應該係整體嘅免費電視市場嘅持續經營嘅能力呢方面去考慮嘅。
只要係我哋係符合有關嘅法定嘅要求咧，個牌照就要發出。呢個係我哋所收到嘅法律意見，而當時嗰位高級嘅官員咧，亦都係咁樣解釋俾我哋聽嘅。
Nevertheless, he managed to survive as the company acquired mobile TV business from China Mobile last week, allowing him to re-embark on his TV dream from July 1st next year. Even the public broadcaster couldn't escape from PR disaster. In March, media report revealed that the RTHK's acting assistant director of broadcasting for FSC's promotion was put on hold after speaking to the media that he had been asked to execute a political agenda.
咁當一個員工啊，佢決定要喺公開嘅場合去交代自己係受到上司嘅壓力啊，係要即係承擔一啲嘅政治任務嘅時候咧，咁我哋不難想像咧，咁嗰個壓力係何等巨大。
我只係聽過施永遠先生講政治壓力，我從來冇聽過施永遠先生講政治任務。
如果公務員覺得佢做嘅嘢係同公務員守則係有違背嘅時候，我係非常之鼓勵我嘅同事係同我講。
贊成嘅請舉手。
But the attempt to find out the truth was failed. At one point, there were reports revealed that FSC had made an appeal to the Civil Service Bureau. 9 months on, he's still serving on acting terms. Homosexuality was once again under the spotlight this year, partly because the Court of Final Appeal handed down a verdict on May 13, citing transsexual person is entitled to marry under the matrimonial ordinance. But indeed, it was the Sexual Orientation Discrimination Ordinance, or the SUDU, which drew much attention. In January, there were rumors that CY Leung would mention the SUDU legislation in his maiden policy address. He didn't do it. Instead, it triggered a war of words.
唔同意同性戀並唔代表歧視同性戀者，我哋一樣教會都係一路都係關心牧養同性戀者。
The basic principle in our society is not to discriminate anybody, including we need to give equal opportunity to all people, irrespective of what characteristics they have, including sexual orientation.
The government formed an advisory group on eliminating discrimination against sexual minorities in June, but it didn't set timetable on SUDU. Nevertheless, the Equal Opportunities Commission has invited professionals to find out how to protect the sexual minorities. A final report will be out next year, but it will certainly bring more pressure onto the government. The inquiry into the Lamma Island ferry collision finally concluded on March the 12th. It came following a fatal collision on October 1st, 2012, where Lamma 4 collided with Sea Smooth at about 1 kilometer north of Lamma Island. Lamma 4 sunk after the collision, killing 39 passengers on board. A total of 110 witnesses were testified during the 50-day hearing, and a final report was published on April the 30th. The report revealed a series of malpractices in the Marine Department, which laid down the seas for the accident. Both vessel owners were fined $900 and $2,800 by the court, respectively, for violating the shipping ordinance, while both coxswains are each facing 39 counts of manslaughter charges. The case has been referred to the High Court, pending a trial next year. The government also set up a steering committee aiming to implement the recommendations listed in the report and to rectify the malpractices in the Marine Department. But for the survivors and victims of the families, their ordeals remain as no government officials have been disciplined so far. Welcome back to Hong Kong Review 2013. Once upon a time, bribery and grafting was part of our daily lives in Hong Kong between the 1950s and 1970s. But that's a thing of the past. When the anti-corruption body was formed in 1974, Hong Kong has been transformed into one of the cleanest societies on earth, a pride that the territory has been cherished for nearly 40 years. Unfortunately, the pride was overshadowed by a number of high-profile cases this year. What's even worse was that the Commission itself was also at the center of a scandal. So how come Hong Kong ended up like this? And is the pride really fading out? The former Chief Secretary for Administration, Wafao Hui, and the cross-brothers of Sun Hung Kai Group and 2 other seniors will reappear at court early in the year. The legal proceedings came following the ICAC arrest operation last July, as Wafao Hui was accused of accepting bribery from the cross-brothers. The case has been referred to the High Court pending the trial on May the 8th next year. Their fates remain uncertain, but for Wafao Hui, it's pretty bad already. A number of banks filed their petitions to the High Court since April, urging him to repay the debt. He couldn't repay a penny and declared bankrupt by the High Court on November 27. Another former official was also ended up in court this year. The former Secretary for Development, Chai-kwong, and the Assistant Director of Highways Department, Kin-yuk, were found guilty of deceiving the government of Hong Kong. They were arrested by the ICAC in July last year as they were accused of making bogus property tenancy allowance claims by cross-holding and cross-leasing their flats in North Point between 1986 and 1990, involving some 700,000 Hong Kong dollars. Both men were sentenced to 8 months of imprisonment, suspended for 2 years.
I'm very sorry for involving Mr. Zhang in this particular case, in particular his family, his Mrs. Zhang and his 2 sons. And I think if I haven't taken up his post last year, this whole thing would not appear. Mr. Zhang was my friend, was my good friend, and he's continued to be my good friend, and I think we will be friends for life.
But that friendship comes at a price, as the Civil Service Bureau is preparing to take disciplinary action against him. Unfortunately, Chai-kwong's successor didn't learn anything from there. On July 21st, Paul Chan was accused of having pecuniary interest in a piece of land in Pudong, where he has been working on the Northeast New Territories Development Program. It was his second scandal within a year.
如果你唔係壞人，你見到着數會拎嘅時候，你周圍嘅人都會拎。你第二個又做到第二啲更加着數嘅，你又拎，咁點搞呢？
我哋係俾足夠機會你去解釋嘅。你未來點做呢？除咗辭職之外咧，其他我哋係冇興趣，唔係話你點樣賣咗笪地就得㗎。
Paul Chan admitted that the land was owned by his family member's company, but he was trying to cover up who is actually holding the company.
我嘅太太曾經係一間公司嘅董事同埋少數股東，嗰間公司咧係由佢同佢嘅屋企人、佢嘅家族成員所擁有。我冇再補充啦。
Paul Chan is still on the job, but it doesn't mean he's off the hook, as the ICAC is now investigating on this matter. 3 of the CY Leung underlings were in limbo this year. On August 1st, Franklin Lam resigned as executive councillor after 10 months of ICAC investigation. His trouble began in October 2012 as media report revealed that he sold 2 flats here in mid-levels just before the government unveiled the controversial special stamp duty in October 2012. As a result, he managed to bypass the levy and cashed in from the deal. Subsequently, the ICAC launched an investigation on him, but it proved nothing. Despite he was cleared by the ICAC, Franklin Lam still decided to quit as executive councillor. Executive Councillor and founder of Hong Kong Mercantile Exchange, Barry Cheung, resigned from all the public duties on May 24th following a police operation. His misfortune began on May 18th as the Mercantile Exchange surrendered its trading license to the Securities and Futures Commission amid financial difficulty. 3 days later, the police raided the company's headquarters in Telegraph Bay, where huge bundles of false documents were found. 9 people were arrested by the police. 4 of them were ended up in court and charged with possessing false documents with intent, of which a Malaysian guy had been sentenced to 6 months of imprisonment. It's not yet clear whether he will end up in court. Indeed, it's even worse for this man. In January, the 64-year-old former deputy chairperson and executive director of Pearl Oriental Oil Limited, Mon-hung, was charged by the ICAC over perverting the course of justice as he attempted to stop an ICAC investigation by intimidation. The die-hard CY Leung supporter later expressed his gut feeling to this magazine as he revealed how he was betrayed by CY Leung. At one point, the ICAC had attempted to target the magazine, but it failed. Together with 3 others, Liu was also charged by the ICAC over conspiracy to defraud and money laundering in another case. They will be put on trial at the High Court next year.
係咪
咪會認罪啊？大家好。
The saga over the illegal underground palace at Henry Tan's bungalow in Kowloon Tong was partially concluded this year. Lisa Kwok, the wife of former chief executive election contender Henry Tan, the architect, surveyor and the constructor of the bungalow, were accused of carrying out construction work without obtaining approval from the buildings department. At one point, the ICAC had intervened, but no further action was taken. Lisa Kwok pleaded guilty, but her husband expressed grievances over how they had been treated.
We have always taken the attitude, the stand, that we are open and frank about it. We have cooperated with the investigation, and we are prepared to take responsibility for our actions. 我相信呢，係因為選舉呢，成件事呢先至搞成咁樣嘅。
Well, that's understandable, as illegal structure was also found at CY Leung's home last year, but no legal action has been taken so far. Lisa Kwok was fined $100,000 by the court on November 27th, but the trial against the architect and constructor is still going on. Alright, they all end up in court because of the rule of law, but what would Hong Kong be if a law enforcement body is showing signs of decay? In November, the LegCo's Public Accounts Committee published a report condemning the former ICAC Commissioner Timothy Tong was a big spender. It came following an Audit Commission's report published in March, in which it blamed the ICAC's excessive spending when hosting official banquets and carrying out official duties abroad. The revelation was so explosive, a series of hearings was heard at LegCo, and CY Leung also ordered an independent inquiry over the cause of the mess. Far from provoking, but the saga was nothing more than a soap opera.
你有冇印象記得翻呢個團啊？湯先生，呢個九寨溝團咧？
我有印象，記得去呢個團。我聽議員講係九寨溝團。嗰日喺落山咧，係非工作元素嗰個成分係相當多。
牛腩魚蛋作存儲禮物，咁嚟到入數嘅嗰個授權係咪你閣下做嘅咧？呢個係得到我批准嘅。
一啲嘅絲巾咧，咁點樣因公作為機構對機構嘅禮物咧？
絲巾嘅送出我冇特別印象。
你話人哋送荔枝俾我，我就送牛腩魚蛋俾佢，有同質性，呢啲叫禮尚往來。送個錶俾你，佢送個金撈俾佢，你咪送翻個江詩丹頓俾佢啊
！The committee considers it inexcusable and condemns the ICAC for failing to put in place adequate checks and balances.
湯先生喺佢嘅職務嗰陣時，同埋佢職位嗰陣時咧，係做啲咁嘅情況出嚟咧，我哋覺得係不可接受嘅。
So a highly respectful law enforcement body ended up in a bizarre farce. Didn't he feel ashamed?
有錯必認，亦都唔可以唔認，冇隱瞞，冇説謊，冇私人動機，冇私生仇殺，更加係與貪錢無關。
Funny, peculiar. Anyway, that concludes Hong Kong Review 2013. We leave you now with some remarkable scenes of the year. From me, from the entire team here, Happy New Year. Goodbye.
做錯咗啲乜嘢？
但唔係正義，唔係你企翻起身。